We think of schools as allies in children's education, but for a struggling student, they can be an enemy. School policies often work against struggling students. Policies that seem logical on the surface, yet doom children to a life of struggle and emotional problems. It's all too easy for parents to go along with it, not realizing the damage done until it's too late. In this video, you will learn what that policy is, why it is so damaging, and what to do about it. To understand why it is so damaging, we have to understand a few simple facts about learning and the brain. Let's start with learning to read. The human brain does not come hardwired for reading. No one has the brain connections necessary for reading at birth. Our brain builds itself to be able to read. People with dyslexia are not born with missing or dysfunctional brain parts. No one has those parts at birth. They are developed through complex neurobiological processes in response to stimuli. Our brain builds itself. Reading hasn't been around that long. It's a recent invention. So it would be silly to think that brains are born ready to learn to read. But they can and do adapt. The human brain has extraordinary abilities for adaptation. It can figure out how to use its existing structures, rewiring and rebuilding them to develop new skills. And when it comes to reading or math or writing, that's what it does. Let's jump into the neuroscience just for a moment. You don't have to remember any neuron names, but it is good to get a basic understanding of what's going on. It will help you see why school policies can be so harmful. Learning to read starts with visual processing. The primary visual cortex, located in the occipital lobe at the back of the brain, receives visual information from the eyes. This area normally processes visual stimuli, but as we learn, this area adapts itself to the visual processing of letters and words. Next, the brain does a magic trick. It forms a new area specifically needed for reading. This is called the visual word form area, located in the left fusiform gyrus. The VWFA is thought to develop a visual dictionary of common words and letter combinations. Your brain rewires this area to recognize words as whole units or to decode letter sequences rapidly. As this is happening, the brain is also engaging in phonological processing. It is decoding sounds from written symbols. This process relies on a different region of the brain, the phonological loop in the left hemisphere. This includes areas like the superior temporal gyrus and the supramarginal gyrus. These areas help translate letters and words into their corresponding sounds. It's not necessary to remember all of the specific regions and such. What is essential is to realize that separate processes are working in parallel. The brain engages in semantic processing once words are recognized and their phonological aspects decoded. In other words, it processes the meaning of words and sentences. So another parallel process is going on. So the brain has to figure out how to get all these processes together, which is not a natural skill because we're not born with a brain part to do that. Our brain builds it. Over time, the brain integrates these processes more seamlessly, leading to increased reading fluency. Connections between the brain's visual, language, and cognitive control areas strengthen, allowing for faster, more automatic reading and comprehension, unless they don't. Sometimes this wiring takes more work for some, and when it has yet to develop fully, it's essential to recognize that it hasn't, or else things are going to get worse. Your brain doing all of this rewiring and adapting is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is fundamental to the development of reading skills, and all other skills too. We are born with very few instincts or abilities. Unlike other animals, we build them all. It's the same for writing skills and math skills. Neither of those has been around for much of human history. They're both recent inventions, so the brain builds the parts necessary. Yet, for some reason, we expect our brains to have the parts needed for reading, writing, and math right there, sitting and waiting to be used. Well, they don't. You even hear dyslexia explained as the brain not having those parts. True, they don't, but the people that explain it that way fail to mention that neither does anybody else. We create them. Writing is a built skill too. Think of writing as teaching your brain a new way to dance with a pen or pencil. First, your brain has to get the hang of the physical part, like holding a pencil and making shapes on paper. In other words, the motor skills. The motor cortex is learning to tell your hand what to do. Then it learns the shapes of letters, which involves the visual part of the brain. The same area that helps you recognize words when reading enables you to remember how to make them when writing. As you write, your brain connects the sounds of words to the letters. The brain's language areas work together with the part that controls your hand movements, making sure what you write matches what you're thinking. Again, very separate parts of the brain learning to work together. Math requires a slightly different set of brain gymnastics. The parietal lobe helps with processing numerical information. The frontal lobe of your brain lights up to assist with logic and problem solving. This area is like the commander-in-chief. It makes the decisions. All the while, the visual and spatial processing areas are looking for patterns and understanding spatial information. There are a lot of processes going on to coordinate any of these skills, and none of them are coordinated naturally. Neuroplasticity is the superhero behind the scenes in reading, writing, and math. It allows the brain to change, to be able to do these things and get stronger at these tasks with practice. Whether dancing with words or playing with numbers, your brain adapts and grows. So what does this have to do with school policy? Well, we have to understand one more important thing to understand that. Between the ages of 5 and 12, children undergo significant changes in neuroplasticity. Between ages 5 and 7, children are in a high plasticity state. At these ages, children are highly receptive to learning new skills. The brain can easily adapt as needed. The brain's ability to form new connections in response to experience is at a peak. Between ages 8 and 10, the brain begins to refine and specialize its functions. While plasticity remains high, there's a shift towards strengthening the neural pathways that are used most frequently. Skills practiced regularly become more ingrained. So there's a shift from being highly adaptable to highly efficient. Rather than building new areas, it is more focused on improving what it has. As children approach adolescence, their brain starts the process of synaptic pruning. Unused connections are eliminated to make the brain more efficient. This does not mean a decrease in learning ability. Rather, it signifies a shift towards more efficient brain function based on the use it or lose it principle. This is not to say that neuroplasticity stops. It doesn't. Our brains have the neuroplasticity at any age. What I am saying is that in the early years, a child's brain has higher levels of neuroplasticity. It is looking for ways to adapt itself to the environment. And if there is to be an intervention, then these early years will be when it should happen, simply because interventions are natural and easy at these young ages. So if a child shows signs of reading, writing, or math difficulties, the sooner the better. But that's not what happens. School policy generally does not allow for that. Most schools have what is often referred to as wait to fail approach. The wait to fail policy refers to a traditional approach where students must significantly fall behind their peers or fail to meet expected academic standards before receiving additional support or intervention for learning struggles. They have a reactive rather than a proactive approach. These schools only provide targeted interventions or support once a student's academic performance clearly lags behind their peers. They wait until students are already getting poor grades or have shown poor scores on standardized tests, or both. They often rely on benchmark failures, such as being unable to read at a grade level standard or passing specific assessments. It's sort of like a factory does quality control. These schools typically lack early screening or identification processes. Because of this, intervention only happens once the student has fallen far behind. Most of this is due to limited resources. Teachers may not have the time or training to notice learning issues, especially with large class sizes. But it's also because the early signs of learning struggles are subtle, especially in younger children. Difficulty focusing, slower work pace, or mild disinterest might not raise immediate red flags, even the most observant of parents often miss an underlying learning struggle. Then, take into consideration that some behaviors associated with learning difficulties are often misattributed to laziness, low motivation, or poor study habits. So, the underlying struggle gets missed. If parents are relying on the school system to notice, it's not at all surprising that children often fall several years behind their peers before anything is done. Do you see where this creates a big problem? The wait to fail policy ensures that children do not get the help they need until they are long past those early years of high neuroplasticity, the years when intervention is much easier, the years when the brain still has the opportunity to build those critical structures needed for reading, writing, and math. And that causes other significant issues. The first, emotional challenges. Waiting until failure can exacerbate academic struggles and lead to emotional and psychological consequences, including decreased self-esteem, increased anxiety, and a negative attitude towards school. This is why we promote neuroscience-based confidence-building strategies. You can get the videos on that right here. Read the comments on any of our dyslexia videos and you will find countless adults who suffered emotional damage due to a lack of intervention. Some of them are very extreme. It's not a hidden problem. We get comments detailing the psychological damage every single day. And none yet about a school that intervened early. There is a long road to catch up when an intervention happens late. The longer it takes to begin interventions, the more challenging it is for students to catch up with their peers. Early gaps in foundational skills widen over time, making it more difficult for students to achieve grade-level competency. Some can get so far behind that they just get warehoused until graduation. An effective science-backed intervention is never done. Did you know that 2/3 of US high school students are below what is considered adequate proficiency in reading and math? It's shocking. The students who do not get early intervention exhibit decreased motivation and become disengaged from learning, often leading to truancy problems and worse. Another scary statistics. Some studies show that up to 60% of prison populations have learning disabilities. How many of those problems could have been prevented? Although it would be great if this wait-to-fail policy changed overnight, it won't. There's enormous systemic inertia. Changing ingrained practices within schools takes time and effort. And implementing proactive intervention system requires resources and commitment. Of course, much more is lost in not implementing them. Students will require much more help later with smaller results. Schools are not saving money with these policies. They just kick the can down the road. And what is the cost of lost productivity or lost quality of life for these students? Incalculable. Much could be prevented with early intervention. But since that is unlikely, it's up to parents. Parents can use programs such as the Learning Success System at home instead. It's an at-home early remediation program that is very simple for parents to implement. There's a link for a free trial in the description. Individuals with dyslexia typically fall behind their peers from 1st through 4th grade. During these elementary school years, children are expected to transition from learning to read to reading to learn. Reading then becomes a necessary skill for all other subjects, making it hard for them to keep up with all academics. The curriculum increasingly relies on students reading and understanding complex texts independently, so they have to work harder and harder as time goes on. The problem spirals out of control, but there is hope. Even if school bureaucracies prevent early detection and early intervention, the information is far more available for parents now than it ever was. If you have a gut feeling about your child and want to learn more, you can watch this video on the early signs of dyslexia right here. Or if your child is struggling in other areas and you're not sure why, then watch our video on types of learning disabilities by clicking right here.